Hey everyone, this is Tamara and welcome to Book Chat Live. Thank you for watching. Today I am chatting with Duane Wurst, the author of young adult historical fantasy fiction title, Deadly 16. Be sure to hit that subscribe button because every Sunday for the rest of this month, I'll be featuring live interviews with the authors that will be in attendance at Rust City BookCon. If you don't know what that is, be sure to check out the link below or go to rustcitybookcon.com. Tickets are still available. Without further ado, hello, Duane, and welcome. Thanks for talking to me this afternoon.
Hello, Tamara. It's good to be here.
Oh, wonderful. So how are you on this Michigan summer day?
It's beautiful. I've been out in the garden feeding the birds, feeding the rabbits, keeping them out of the garden. So I've been enjoying it very much.
Oh, that's cool. I've been in mostly today, but it's nice and sunny. It was a little gloomy earlier, so it's a good thing it's clear.
Yeah, when I walked over to the studio, there were a few sprinkles coming down. So, which up here we need the rain. So.
Oh, we need the rain here too. We were like, I don't know if you guys got a little warning against fireworks in dry, wooded areas, but we got that.
Well, yeah, we did. They probably did. I live out in the country, so there's a lot of area that they can throw their fireworks off. So.
Oh wow! All right.
And my neighbors do.
Very cool. Okay, well, let's just jump right in, shall we?
Okay.
All right. So I know you haven't been reading recently, but what have you been listening to on audiobook? Please share with us.
Well, I listen to a variety of audiobooks, and the one reason I don't read very much is I am a pathetically slow reader, and I have this tendency of I start a page, I read for an hour, and realize that I covered that page and didn't pay much attention to it. So I have a little bit of that attention deficit because I'm always going off into space thinking of something else. But I found that if I listen to an audiobook, it's there. I remember it. And even if my mind can go off into other areas. I can think of other things, but I'm hearing the story and it sticks. And so, I mean, I've listened to all of the Janet Ivanovich novels, the Cat Who series, most of David Badalchi's books, Patterson's books. The last book that I did was a Badalchi, and it was forgotten. John Puller, a detective series. So I like his writing in the sense of you're always on the edge of your seat, and But then, I mean, I like so many different types of books. And this Ivanovich, I love her sense of humor.
Yeah, she's funny. She definitely is funny.
Yeah, in fact, I used a lot of her type of humor in my Death on the Point. It was a murder mystery, but the characters are just constantly getting into those kinds of problems where it's just humorous situations, and and their comments are funny, and yet it's a serious book. So, I like that combination.
Yeah. Well, I find that very cool that you listen to audiobooks because I don't know if you're familiar with my channel at all, but I listen to a good amount of audiobooks. I really enjoy them. Almost as much as reading, especially if you can find the perfect narrator for it.
The narrator makes a big difference because it's, and I just love a good narrator where you almost feel like you're watching a movie with your eyes closed, because it's just, if it's really a well-produced novel. In fact, there was this one time I was listening, it was at night, I was listening to a Badalchi novel, and there's always explosions and gunfire. I pulled into a gas station, and suddenly there's explosion and there's gunfire. And I stopped, I looked around, and then I thought, oh no, I have my headphones on. Nobody's shooting at me.
Oh, that's funny. But I have had to, like, unlike with the headphones, I just listen to them on my car stereo. So I've had to actually turn down the volume of some things. I'm like, oh, I don't want anyone to hear this.
I throw the headphones in, and it's usually I can still hear the outside noise. At least I hope I can.
Yeah,
I'm sure if I get stopped, I'm going to be pulling them out very quickly.
Oh, that's funny. Wow. So you mentioned Ivanovich kind of influencing one of your books. How about are there any others that may have influenced your writing style? Maybe.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the Hunger Games. I listened to the whole series back many years ago before they did the movie, and I liked the way she created the world. The alternate existence, and I think that kind of influenced my first novel. I mean, all of my novels have. I think they have just little elements of other styles, but I don't sit down and say, this is how I want to write this book. It just sort of happens.
Right.
So there's Deadly 16. I don't really. I don't know what the influence was on it. I know that it took a lot of work to write, a lot of imagination.
I believe that. We're going to jump into that in a moment. But before we starting to talk about that book, let's tell me a little bit, what made you want to become a writer? What inspired you to start writing to begin with?
Well, I've been an author, I've been an artist all of my life. I studied to be an art teacher, and I met my wife doing art shows, and we've been married for around 30 years. But so art has always been a passion with me, and for a while I wasn't doing any artwork, and I started listening to the audiobooks on a very regular basis, and it kind of reminded me that there was a story that I had always wanted to write, and I knew how to publish because I had been publishing a magazine, and I had worked on a newspaper as a graphic artist, and so I had the background that I could do my own self-publishing, and I was reading online one of the blogs. It wasn't yours, but and this woman made the statement. She said, there is only one difference between doing something successfully and not doing something successfully. It's a one word, and that's trying.
Try.
Try. If you'll never succeed if you don't try.
That's true.
So I decided I'm going to write this story, and it was the first novel, but it was a story that I had told my family members, young students, and I'd always wondered what would happen if they found a spaceship, and discovered that the spaceship was millions of years old, and it was the original spaceship where God sent angels to Earth to make way for mankind. And so it was just that idea. So I decided I'm going to write this story, and I sat down and I got to 10,000 words, and I said, oh my God, I'm lost. And I discovered that the problem that I had was working in one document. Trying to do a whole novel was just impossible. So I researched, and I found a couple of programs that allow you to split the novel up into two scenes, and identify the characters. Because there's so many times that I would say, well, what did I call that person?
Oh
Who didn't I have, him being tall, and, it just, by having a good program, it allowed me to continue on, and I successfully wrote the story, and had it published, joined a good authors group, and got a lot of feedback, and and then once I had one under my belt, I said, let's go.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about your featured title, which is Deadly 16.
Yes.
So this is clearly, it's a young adult novel, and it's also a historical fiction title, and it's also a fantasy title.
It is Rust City in full. I mean, it is a smashing of different genre. And when I wrote it, I didn't set out and say, I want to write a young fiction, for teenagers. I set out where it was a story, and it just so happens that my character is 15 years old. So, but yeah.
So tell us a little bit, give us a little snippet about the plot of your book.
Well, I will. I mean, the way that the book developed was I substitute teach, and I was teaching in a class as I was substituting for a special ed teacher, and she goes into the different classrooms and follows a group of students throughout the day. And we were in the English class, and the English teacher was discussing how to come up with an idea for your writing. And she was assigning the students, they had to write a story. And as I sat there, I just started thinking, like, how do I come up with an idea? And suddenly in my mind popped the idea that what would happen if there was a 15-year-old girl walking to school with her best friend, and just before she got to school, she was shot, and is dying in the first chapter. And then what would happen if that girl, through modern science, was saved? Her life was saved, but they used nanobots, miniature robots. And when she woke up, she started remembering her previous lives. And I thought, well, and what would happen if this all happened in Detroit? And and the history that her previous lives were lives that she had lived throughout the history of Detroit.
Wow.
And so from there, I mean, that's where I ended when I left the class. Is that thought was in my mind, and I just thought, this, I've got to write this story.
Wow.
And I couldn't stop thinking about the the potential of the story.
Right. Well, it's definitely a lot of genre mashing, and it sounds like it could be somewhat complex story. But do you think that it's still, I guess not to say that young adult readers can't understand complex stories, but sometimes it's a 15-year-old versus a 17-year-old, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand, and I've talked to young adult readers that love it. I've talked to adults I sell it to a lot of adults that buy it for their children, or their grandchildren. They read it, and then they pass it on. And I think the one thing that helps is the fact that I don't write complicated.
Okay.
My writing is very, from point A to point B. I mean, it reads, I write, like a friend of mine says, it's like following a thought stream. I don't, my plot develops as I'm writing the story. So I basically am telling the story as if you were watching a movie and you see the events unfolding. And so it holds the interest. There's it doesn't jump back and forth.
Okay.
When she is dealing with the past, it's she's telling the story to her friends. Okay, so then you're in the past, and then it very much takes you there in the story as far as the story itself, but it doesn't do a lot of flashbacks and
Well, I kind of like that because I have to say I've read a couple of books that had themes of reincarnation, and I gotta say a lot of them were pretty confusing, and it took a while to kind of understand what was, especially one title in particular. I'm not going to mention the name, but it's like the same thing kept happening over and over again. She keep going back, and it was like this repetitive. She would die, she would come back, and she'd have to redo the thing again. And it was like,
the Fallen series kind of follows that theme where it's where it's this has all happened before, and so like, yeah, I mean, it's I wasn't sure when I started to write it how I was going to handle it. I just knew that there was a story to be written.
Okay. So we know the story takes place in Detroit, but what time does the story begin? I mean, it makes me feel like it's a little sci-fi, a little bit with the nanobots and things.
Well, a little bit, but it actually begins at King High School, and the girl lives just north of the cemetery. And she's into the Charlevoix area, and she's they're walking to King High School, so the action takes place today.
Okay,
it's current, and she goes to DMC emergency, and it deals with the emergency, what has happened. So yes, it's very much happening today. It's not really science fiction because even the use of the nanobots, that's current.
Okay.
I mean, it's being done.
Well, I'm glad I haven't had a need to try any nanobots. I'm just saying.
Well, it's a lot of it. It's very much like a lot of medications now. They're going to be able to treat like with stem cells, but they can use a nanobot, which is just a microscopic, almost like a virus organism that can deliver the medication that you need where you need it. Okay. And that was the technique that I used in the story. Okay. I did a lot of research, and I learned a lot of things that I didn't know.
Okay, so she gets this treatment, and then she wakes up and she finds that she's remembering past lives.
Well, I mean, there's a scene in the story where her friend is sitting throughout her treatment. Her family is coming in and they're talking to her because the doctors have informed her that she's in a coma, but she's able to hear. And their conversations. So they're talking to her. They're sharing their lives. So the first part of the novel, you learn a lot about the characters, and you learn about the main characters just based on her friends talking to her, and her parents talking to her, and her grandfather. Her father is dead. He died in Iraq, but she is bonded real close with her grandfather, who was a history professor at Wayne State University. So he was like a Detroit history buff and had taught Detroit history. So in the novel, he is telling a lot of the stories about Detroit to her. So you get when she does come to, her best friend is sitting with her, and she says, what do you remember? What do you remember about when you were shot and almost killed? And my character says, that's a problem. She says, as I think about when I was shot, She says, I remember being shot 6 times previously.
Oh, wow.
And I was killed.
Wow.
You know, and her friend is like, you know, shh, don't tell anybody. They're gonna think you're not.
They're gonna throw you in the loony bin.
They're gonna have you going upstairs. You know, you can't. Don't
Yeah.
tell them that. And so then it becomes a situation where she's, you know, they're trying to convince her you're just dream. You know, it's just a dream. You're just remembering. The doctors aren't sure, but she tells the story of her previous lives, and it starts in Fort Pontchartrain when she was the daughter of the Huron Indian chief.
Okay.
And it gives the story of the first settlement in Detroit. And go ahead.
Well, clearly there's a lot of history here of different, you know, things that have gone on in different times, not to mention, you know, some research you've had to do for not only the events, but, you know, the medical things. So did you have any, you know, hangups or, you know, struggles with, you know, doing your research to pull this story together?
No, because I'm very adept at using the computer. And so the first thing I did is I just spent hours upon hours surfing the web, looking up history. I used Google Books, and I read, I must say, like every old book on Detroit. I mean, there were a couple of them that were from the 1800s. That were actually published in the 1800s. And I read as much as I possibly could. I read other stories about, you know, that people had written on the history and tidbits of information. And then I read up on all of the Indian history going back to to when the French first came into Canada, and, you know, settled into Michigan, the Michigan area. So it was just a lot of research, a lot of reading and investigating, and, you know, and it's odd because I really didn't take notes, but I did a lot of like cut and paste of just information. I set a timeline, and, you know, just to what, and I picked out what periods I wanted her to live.
Okay.
And, you know.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Tiana. She is the protagonist of the story, the main character. It's told from her point of view, essentially.
Which was a challenge.
Yes. Let's talk about that a little bit, shall we? Because Tiana is 15.
She's a 15-year-old Black girl.
Yes, and you are none of those three things.
No, I don't live in Detroit.
Yep.
I'm a northern Michigan farmer. So yes, it was the idea. You know, at first I questioned, okay, well, can I really write a successful novel, you know, from the perspective of a 15-year-old Black girl living in Detroit? And I guess I didn't really doubt my ability to do it.
Okay.
Because I figured, okay, she's a person, she's a character,
right.
You know. And I've done a lot of theater. I've never acted the part of a 15-year-old Black girl, but I could imagine, you know, how she would think, how she would talk. And I did have, after I wrote the book, I did have an individual read it that pointed out some errors that I made as far as how my character talked. And she kind of implied that I pushed a little bit over the top on a few instances.
Okay.
And she said, tone it down. Just, you know, just don't exaggerate. Try to exaggerate the character
Mm-hmm.
And so, so I did. I mean, I ended up having a lot of like, girl,
Mm-hmm.
and it just, it was just kind of a cliche that didn't really help the story.
Mm. Well, I was wondering if there'd be any of those in there, but you answered that question.
They've been edited out.
Yeah.
Uh, I have a strong feeling when I write. Uh, I it's like I've been questioned, why do my characters speak good English? And I said, because they go to school.
Mm-hmm.
Because my characters are they study, they're intelligent. I said, why do we think that just because you're a different culture that you have to speak uh, in a cliche, in a stereotypical fashion? I said, if we're speaking English, we should all be able to speak English the same way. So my character shouldn't have to sound black
Right.
just because she's a black girl. In the
Right.
same way that if she was Irish, should she be talking with the Irish brogue? You
Right.
know, and unless if it's needed for that character, it's not required. So
Right. And I like intelligent, strong leading girls or women, depending on
yeah,
the age range. And yeah, I like when I don't see the stereotypical thing in books that gets kind of old.
well, yeah, it does. It's I mean, all of my books are the characters are very grounded.
Mm-hmm.
They're not they don't swear. I mean, they cuss a little bit, but it's not, and that's not what I'm trying to portray. I'm not, if I were writing something where I was dealing with a gang, gangsters, uh, you know, I might want to write it a little bit different. But then the characters, I mean, there are interviews with gang members,
Mm-hmm.
and those characters, they do have, a little bit of a different attitude.
Yeah.
And so I show their attitude the way that I would picture a belligerent teenager to be. And trust me, as a substitute teacher, I've had enough of them.
Oh, there's belligerent children everywhere of all colors,
Oh, there
all
are,
race.
there are.
And they all have that same, attitude.
Oh, and it is, and it's a lot of it is just, it's not even the attitude. It's like, it's the look.
Mm-hmm.
When suddenly the eyes curl up and or roll up, and it's like, I'm not listening. I'm not listening.
Yeah. Well,
But
Tiana takes her best friend and her crush along with her on her journey, or for
she does. She
yeah.
does. She had, yeah. In the story, she had just broken up with one boyfriend, and because he wanted to get serious, he was going on to college, and she's got a crush on this boy that is a little bit like Raj on The Big Bang Theory, where he's just very awkward with talking to her. I mean, he's got a crush on her, she's got a crush on him, but every time they stop to talk, he's just sort of like doesn't know what to say, and he goes off, and and then it ends up that he comes to visit along with Amber, my character's girlfriend, and he gets the courage to talk to her since she can't talk back.
Oh, of course.
And so you start learning a little bit about his feelings, and and she's, I mean, in the first paragraph in the book, she's having a dream about him, asking her out to the Thanksgiving dance,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's like you beat him right away, and and he's just a typical teenager.
All right.
They go on to the event. They go on and with her to on her adventure.
Okay.
Discovery.
So as the story goes on, is there a lot of character development amongst the three of them?
Yeah, there is. The Tiana, you can see that she becomes much more focused, because she's learning a lot of what of her past. I mean, she's learning about her past. Her girlfriend is kind of her girlfriend is a little bit like, I mean, Tiana's beautiful. She's all the boys, are they're just oogling her, or whatever you want the kids call it. But and Amber is a little bit more plain, but Amber can talk to anyone.
Okay.
So Amber, they have a symbiotic relationship, because Amber kind of screens the guys out for her.
Okay.
And gives her the insight as to, oh, don't bother with him. He's kind of, he's into drugs, or he's, and she's, Tiana is a little bit more naive, I guess I would say.
Okay.
And, she's a little more trusting. And really in her character, every time that she goes back, talks about her past life, the character, it is a little bit different. Each one is a little bit different because of the way that she was brought up at that time. But you can see glimpses of her, and you can see why she's the girl that she was. And so yeah, there's character development, but it's not a lot.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, you have to understand that the entire story takes place in less than 10 days.
Wow, that's a fast pace. Yeah.
Okay,
that's cool.
So it's just, it's in, it's out, and it's like, yeah. I mean, it's a very, it's, in fact, I had to make notes to keep track of, like, what hour am I on,
Okay.
And so
that's very cool. So tell me a little bit about what's coming up for you. Does Deadly 16 get a sequel?
It has a sequel. The sequel, when I started Deadly 16, I was on the sequel to my Death on the Point book, and I was about a third of the way done. I'm almost done with that. There's just, like, I'm at right around 60,000 words, and I've got probably another 5 or 6 chapters to finish up. But this summer has just been absolutely a nightmare. I mean, it's just so many things happening, so many things to do. But the moment that I ended, was finished Deadly 16, I knew where the sequel was going to go. And it's going to involve history again, but it's going to involve her working with the police. Her best friend's father is a police detective, Detroit police detective. So he's a crucial part of the story. And in the sequel, she's going to be going into the past, and and visiting and investigating, and
time travel. I like it.
Well, they're looking for a serial killer that was operating in the past, and there's a few little switch ups and changes, and it'll just like Deadly 16 at the end of the book is kind of a shocker, and I don't tell anybody.
Okay. Don't tell us. We don't want to spoil it. Don't spoil it.
No. But the sequel is going to be kind of the same way, where it's really, it's going to dig deep into the history and into the characters, and I mean, I have to admit, I mean, the novel itself is very, oh, I'm not black, okay? I would have to say that I would have a very hard time to tell people that I understand what it's like to be black. I mean, they would any more than somebody could tell me that they know what it's like to be me.
Mm-hmm.
But when I started researching, I found information and I found history that totally changed my perception of Detroit, of what it was like to be black during, you know, the history throughout the history of Detroit. And my novel is very honest in the sense of how many times the black community has been screwed in Detroit, and how many situations have come up. I mean, I never knew that the first race riot in Detroit was in 1943. The race riot was when the black community was attacked by whites. Okay, and you know, and it's like, and it's just in the same sense as the Hastings Street community was a vibrant black community.
Yeah.
I mean, there was businesses that were in operation that were owned by blacks, and so suddenly the city, in its infinite wisdom, decides that it needs an urban renewal. Well, that's kind of like saying, well, you know, like your house is old, we're going to move you.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, well, why do I? But I want to stay here. You know, no, we're going to move you. So, you know, so it's like they destroyed an entire community in the name of urban renewal.
Yeah, gentrification, isn't that what it's called?
Yeah, it's called really nasty.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so my book deals with that quite honestly. I mean, it's very blunt. I've had I can't say that I've had anyone question the tone of the novel. In fact, yesterday I was doing an art show in Port Austin. It's actually a farmer's market, but I set up selling my artwork and my novels, and a fellow came up. Was in his probably 60s, late 60s, and he came up and he wanted one of my other books, and he started talking. He said he bought Deadly 16 in the spring, and he said he says, I want to tell you something. He says, I grew up. He told me, he says, I grew up 11 Mile and Van Dyke. He said, I have worked downtown Detroit ever since I was a teenager. And he says, that's where I work. He says, it's my community. He says, I have friends that live right around the King High School area. Mm-hmm. And he says, I read the book, and he says, I absolutely loved it. He says, and I'm like just blown away. And he says, but I hope you don't mind that I'm doing something. And I said, what's that? He said, well, he says, I'm sharing your book. Said, you don't mind?
Awesome.
And I said, well, mind? I said, I appreciate it. And he said, what he's doing is he gives the book to friends in the Detroit area, and he tells them that he only has one requirement. After they read it, they have to give it to somebody else. Mm-hmm. And he says he figures that it's been like 7 or 8 families now that have read it, and he said that the feedback has been very positive, that they like the fact that it's their community.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
Well, and that's one reason I wanted to do the Rust City convention, is that I'm hoping. I mean, it's a Detroit novel, mm-hmm. and it should be made available and known in Detroit.
Yes,
because that's where the market should be for the book, and and if I get negative feedback, well, That's
Hey, it's a part
fine.
of being a writer, right?
Oh, it is. It is.
Yes. So speaking of being a writer, we know there's always writers out there in the audience. Do you have any sage advice for aspiring writers?
I I would, yeah. I mean, my first advice is if you're going to write, get software that will help you. I use Write. It's a free software. I have friends that use was it Scrivener. It's just, you know, either have a software like that or do a lot of note cards and keep track of your characters, keep track of your plot. You know, don't think that you can just sit down and write 80,000 words without having to go back and find it on that document.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I've worked with large documents and they're not fun trying to find where, you know,
Right.
where you talked about the color of her hair.
Right. And, you know, continuity is important and people
Oh,
remember that.
It
So
is.
that's
In
great
fact,
advice.
yeah, and I know I had a lot of editing work because my doctor, the main doctor in the novel, I changed the spelling of his name twice,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just a nightmare trying to find every time that to go back and to make sure that I had his name correctly.
Wow.
And readers notice that they don't like to see Mrs. Brown turning out to be Mrs. Braun.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that was great advice. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about Rust City before we wrap things up. So Rust City, it's right around the corner. It's a couple weeks away. So what books will you be having with you at that signing event?
I'm going to bring I have 3 novels.
Okay.
My first novel is In Search of Elysium, and I'll show you. I've got a couple of them here. That was the first novel.
All right.
This one is a sci-fi. Okay, it's a different story because in that particular book, the characters are severely mentally disabled. They're teenagers. They all attend a school for mentally disabled children. Okay. They're 16, 17, and 18. And in the beginning, they have the mentality of like 9, 10-year-olds.
Okay.
But they discover the spaceship, and the spaceship is one of the characters. It's Ellie, and when they find the spaceship, and they touch the spaceship, it changes them, and they start becoming intelligent. Okay. And they find out that the ship tells the children that she tells the story of how the ship came to be, and that it was from Elysium, and it was the spaceship that the angels came looking at Earth to see if it was ready for mankind to be settled here.
Wow.
But they had to leave the ship, and so they left it. And so the one boy wants to find God because he just lost his mother, and so he wants to take the ship back to Elysium. And what entails is the journey back to Elysium and what they find. And so
sounds interesting.
The second novel was Death on the Point. This one is pure, unadulterated detective murder mystery. The young boy discovers while he's doing a paper route at night on the Point, which is an area up in this area, up in Huron County, he witnesses a murder, but nobody believes him. And because he's had other situations where he's not really that he got into trouble, but where things happened to him, and the police know about him, and they just sort of like, there's no evidence.
Okay.
So he convinces his school friends. He's a football player, and but he convinces his friends to help him investigate. So the art department does a composite of who he saw, and they start investigating the murder. And what ends up happening is just it's kind of like it's funny. I mean, they end up down in Detroit during a drug switch.
Okay.
Uh,
All right. Well, that sounds interesting for sure.
it's funny. It's a humorous story.
Okay.
And then Deadly 16. So, I mean, I'm going to be pushing my Deadly 16, but I'm going to have the other ones available there too.
All right. Awesome. So what panels did you sign up for at Rust City?
Well, I signed up for everything. And then, I mean, I anything that seemed that I thought would be appropriate, I was surprised. I self-published, and I didn't get on the panel for self-publishing. But I'm on Friday, August 12th at 1:45. I'm in the Suspense is Killing Me.
Okay.
And the suspense is killing me. I don't know what it's going to be about.
Love that title.
Yeah, and then Saturday at 1:30 to 11:30, it's Historical Surprises.
Okay.
That one fits in very well because I've found a lot of historical surprises. And then one that I think that because I signed up for it, I got on it, is Saturday at 10:45, is the improv flash writing. And I do a lot of like 1,000-word stories,
Okay.
500-word stories. Our writers group, I got them into writing 6-word stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like the challenge of taking a whole story and boiling it down to 1,000 words, so that there's characters, you introduce the characters, you introduce what is happening, and you have like a conclusion to the story. And it's a great challenge to do. So
well, that should be a fun panel to watch.
Yeah, I think that we'll probably end up writing on that. And then I'm going to be in the young adult meet and greet on Saturday at 8 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Okay, that's fun. Meet and greets are always fun.
Yeah, this is the first convention that I've been at, writers convention. I've got some friends that have told me about attending them, and so I'm looking forward to it. It'll be
I
new.
think this was a good one for you to start with because it's not going to be like overly crowded like some of them can be. I think it's going to be a small, quaint, a good group of people. I think it's going to be well attended, but it's not going to be overkill for your first one.
No, and and the thing that I kind of like is it's going to give me the opportunity to meet a lot of other authors from the area, that are, and then that's really like half the that's half the fun.
Oh yeah,
talking to other authors, getting their opinions, and giving my opinion, which I have a lot of.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you will be sharing those in your panels.
I will be.
All right. So let's do the lightning round before we end things. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we jump into this little 60-second fun event?
No, you warned me about this, so
I did.
I'm ready.
Okay, so the lightning round, for those that don't know, it is 60 seconds, 60 questions. Some are book related, some are not. The only rule is that you must choose. You cannot say both or neither. You must select an answer when it's an A or B question. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, so we'll just jump right in. And I'm ready when you are. I have my little timer here so we won't go over.
I'm ready.
All right. Physical books or ebooks?
Physical books.
Hero or villain?
Hero.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Name a book that you've read in one sitting.
The Cat Who, one of the Cat Who books.
Beer or wine?
Wine.
Milk chocolate or dark chocolate?
Dark chocolate.
Vampires or werewolves?
Werewolves.
Where is your favorite place to read?
My car.
Awesome, because audiobooks, right?
Right.
Right. Dogs or cats?
Cats.
Cake or pie?
Pie.
What's your favorite book from when you were a child?
Oh, the Bible, I guess.
Oh, okay. Android or Apple?
Well, Android.
Yes, and Team Android. Okay,
Yes.
that's time. See, that's fun.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you for doing that.
Well, I appreciate your time and your energy. It's been very, very enjoyable.
Oh, well, thank you. So do you have anything else you'd like to share with everyone before we sign off for today?
No, just if you're an author, do it. If you're a reader, read it and enjoy it. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you everyone for watching. Be sure to check out Duane on his social media channels and be sure to download your copy of Deadly 16 today. All of the links are in the notes below. That's it, and thank you for watching. And until next time, happy reading. Bye, guys.
Bye now.